Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Lisa from Recreated Designs, and I'm here to give you some more DIY tips. Today we're going to be talking about inlays. If you have not seen these are absolutely beautiful. I have to say I wasn't really quite hooked on them until I tried them, and now I can't get enough of them. I really think they are absolutely gorgeous. So the one we're going to use today to demonstrate how to do them is one by Iron Orchid Designs, IOD, and it's this beautiful blue one that we're going to use. So I'm going to give you all my best tips and tricks for using inlays so you can use them too. So we're going to start off with a piece of wood here, and I've just got a regular piece of wood. And the first thing we need to do is paint this. So I'm going to use some Fusion Mineral Paint in Picket Fence today. And don't forget to go below, there will be a link, my affiliate link for Fusion Mineral Paint, and you can get 10% off your entire order anytime you use it of anything at Fusion, Milk Paint by Fusion, or Homestead House. So want to make sure that you knew that. And what we're going to do is go ahead and paint this board the whole way around, top and bottom, first with one coat of the picket fence. Alright, so we've got our board and we're going to go ahead and paint it with some of this picket fence Fusion Mineral Paint. And I'm just using a Stahlmeister brush. I love these brushes. And we just want to cover this whole board. It doesn't need to be a thick layer. You just want to make sure that you've got that base coat on here. And make sure you go right over the edges as well. Once we've got this coat completely on, we're going to go ahead and let it dry. This first coat needs to be dry before we move on to the next step. Now that I have a coat of paint on my tray, it's time to get our inlay ready. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the package of inlays. And the inlays come in these pre-painted sheets. So I'm just going to grab one of these out, and I'm going to grab the cover for it as well. And I'll pull that out. How stunning is that? It is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm only going to need one inlay for this project today, so I'm going to put the rest of these aside for now. And we're going to get ready to use this particular inlay on the tray. Now I do need to put another coat of paint on, and you want this coat to be nice and thick. So we're going to put it all over the tray, and I'm using the same Fusion Mineral Paint in Picket Fence here. And I'm going to put it all over the top of my tray. Nice and thick. You really do need to have a thick coat of this on, thicker than what you would put on if you were just painting it. And we can worry about the edges after. I'm just going to put this on. I want to make sure I have lots on there. Okay, and while the paint is still fully wet, we're going to go ahead and lay the inlay on top. I have my inlay here, and I'm not going to trim this because I like to have those little edges just to help me pull it up later. So I'm just going to put this on fully how it is, and start by smoothing this out with your hands just to make that initial contact with the paint. And then I find this easiest to do with a brayer, and I'm going to take the brayer and I'm just going to roll this all over, and that's going to smooth out any of those little bubbles that we have in there. It's also going to give you a really nice contact with your paint. And I just want to go over the whole tray. And once that is nice and stuck down, we want to go ahead and give this a complete spray with just plain water. This is water, and I'm going to go ahead and wet the whole inlay. You can see the color starting to get brighter as I wet it. You really can't over wet it at this point, so make sure that it's nice and saturated. Once you've done that, you can even take your brayer again and just give it one final roll to make sure it is all adhered. Don't push or don't move it around too much because you don't want your inlay to rip, but I'm just giving it that final little push. And now that it's completely saturated, I'm going to leave this until the paper completely dries. So we're going to leave this as it is, walk away, leave it for about an hour, and I'll show you what we're going to do to get our inlay off. Okay, now that this is dried to the touch, and mine took about 45 minutes or so to get to this point, I'm going to re-wet it and wet this paper. And you want to wait about 30 seconds once you re-wet this, just for that to soak in and start getting that paper moist the whole way through so that we can pull it off. So I've got the whole thing wet, and you can see the color changed again. And then I'm just going to leave this for about 30 seconds before we start peeling off the inlay. Okay, now that I've let this sit for a minute, just to let that soak right through, we're going to start peeling this back. So typically I like to start in one corner, and if the paper is giving you any sort of resist, you need some more water to add to that. Or you can just let it sit a little longer too if your paper is kind of, you'll know what I mean, it's kind of resisting you when you go to pull it up. The other thing you can do as well is grab that spray bottle that we had with some water in it and just spritz it. And this is why I like leaving a bit of the paper hanging over, because it gives me something to grab when I'm going to lift this inlay paper up. And I just want to make sure I've got all the edges here. And it might be easier to show you this way, so I'm going to turn around. I've got a little more to grasp here, so I'm going to pull it this way and pull this inlay paper right up. How gorgeous is that? And remember, this inlay that's transferred is wet and that paint is active, so you don't want to use a cloth or do anything and rub it because it's going to smear if you do. Look at that amazing indigo color. Isn't that fantastic? And there we go. Once I have my inlay up, I'm going to go ahead and lay it back on the paper that it came off of. Whoops. Because I can go ahead and use this again. So I'm just going to spread that out onto the paper. Make sure to save these and let them dry out. And I've got mine back here on the paper. I'll just show you, and I'm going to leave that, just set it aside so it can dry. And most of my pattern came off here. There are little bits of areas that didn't, but that's okay. I'm okay with that, because really, if you're using the inlays, you're going to have this gorgeous kind of distressed old world look. So we're going to leave this sit now. We're going to let this dry before we keep working on it. Now that the paint and inlay has had a chance to dry, we want to go ahead and set this. Remember that your inlay paint is active, which means if I added water to this, it would easily just spread around. And so we need to set this with something so that we can finish it and not smear that paint. So I've got a mixture of 50% of a water-based top coat and 50% water, and I'm just going to spritz this all over my board. And this is just going to set this so that we can then go on and brush on a sealer. So I'm just have that spritzed, and then I'm just gonna let this dry. I will give this about a couple of hours anyways before I go on and show you how to brush on the sealer to this. Now that the coat of our 50/50 flat out flat and water is dry and this is set, it's time to add a full layer of protection with the flat out flat, and I'm just going to brush this on now. And you can see how it's not smudging that inlay now that it's protected with that first just spritzy layer. And I'm not worrying too much about this coat because it's a pretty kind of a shabby sheet tray to begin with, so. And then you want to make sure you go right around the edges. And I can even protect this with a second coat when this is dry if it's going to get a lot of use. I'm just going to smooth that out. So I'm just going to let this dry and then I'll be good to go with my new tray. Here's another example of a beautiful inlay. Thank you so much for watching this DIY tip of the day. I'm Lisa from Recreated Designs. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.